In the last video, we created a simple little 4 on the floor rock and roll drum pattern. Let's listen to it. Basically consists of a simple kick drum pattern, snare, and closed hi-hats. There they are. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to copy that pattern and we're going to make some variations, and then we'll talk about using the pattern sequencer to get to change automatically from one pattern to the next. This is a technique that's been used for years with hardware drum machines. Hardware drum machines typically have a setup similar to this, where you can record a whole bunch of patterns and then link those patterns and assign them to play in a specific order in what's called song mode in a hardware drum machine. Reason behaves similar to a hardware drum machine, so that's why it's a good way to demonstrate this technique. Okay, so if you look over here, I'm drawing my mouse around the pattern section of this drum machine. A drum machine is really two devices in one. It's a pattern sequencer and a sound generator. Obviously, this is a sample player. It plays samples of typically drum sounds, but we may look in a future lesson and realize that we can record and or load any type of audio sample into these positions. All right, so I've got my basic drum pattern. Here it is again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that pattern into several of these memory locations. Right now, the only pattern that's recorded is A1, which is currently selected bank A, and I have 8 patterns in that bank. I could load up to, as you can see, 32 different patterns, A1 through 8, B, C, and D 1 through 8. If I click on A2 right now, empty, nothing there. So I'll go back to A1 and I'm going to go up to the Edit menu and I'm going to choose Copy Pattern. Before I click on Copy Pattern, I want you to notice that there's a keyboard shortcut for this, a keyboard command that's listed right there. On a Mac, it would be Command C. On a PC, it's Control C. So I'll click this for now, copy that pattern, and I want to paste the same pattern into these 4 new pattern locations. So I've selected A2. I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose Paste Pattern. Notice it's telling me the keyboard shortcut, if I want to do that in the future, is Command V, V as in Victor. These are the same commands that you'd use in a word processing program. So I'll select Paste, and then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts now to paste that same pattern into A3 and A4. So I've got 4 of the exact same pattern in 4 different locations. Not very interesting, is it? So let's start setting up some variations. For my first variation, I'm going to create 2 different rhythm patterns. Perhaps I'll use one basic rhythm pattern in the first verse, and then maybe in the second verse or the third verse of the song, I want to vary the pattern, much like a real drummer would do. So my first pattern has 16th note closed hi-hat hits. For my pattern A2, I'm going to make a real simple variation. I'm going to get rid of all of these hi-hats, and rather than have it play on 16th notes, every 16th note, I'm going to have it play on 8th notes, so I'll click every other step. Let's hear what that sounds like. A little boring, but it is variation. Let's try to add some different dynamic settings to make it sound a little more lifelike. Maybe a couple of soft hits as well. a little more lifelike. Okay, so that's our first variation. Let's hear the two together. The original and our first variation. Okay, what can we do for the third variation? We have an open hi-hat over here. Oh, that's a crash cymbal. There's the open hi-hat. Let's see if we can do something with that. So I'll again select my hi-hat, which is, since this is the copy, it's playing on 16th notes. I'll get rid of those, and I'm going to select the open hi-hat. And I'll put that a couple of those hits in. Maybe let's try it on beat 1 and beat 4. And then I'll alternate that with some closed hi-hat hits. Okay, so now I've got 3 variations, just changing up the hi-hat part. Right, pretty simple, right? So you can see that by using these techniques, copying, pasting, and then adjusting 1, maybe 2 drums, you can really quickly build up a lot of variations of your patterns. For the last variation, let's leave the hi-hat alone and let's change up the snare drum part a little bit. I just selected the snare drum here in channel 2. You can see currently it's just 2 hits on the 2nd and 4th beat. Okay, maybe that might be a little too busy, but we'll leave it for now. I want to talk to you about one other thing. There's something you can do on Reason that's kind of interesting. It's called flams. Flams are something that drummers use quite often. It's when you either bring 2 sticks down at a slightly varied speed so that they don't hit at exactly the same time. A little difficult to describe in words, but listen to the sound. The way I'm going to create this flam, when you'll notice that when I hit run, you'll see a red light racing across these 16 steps to show me which step is being played at what time. What I'm going to do is right above this hit, I'm going to press on that little light, and that will create a flam. So we'll listen to it. I'll let it run a couple of times without creating the flam, and then when I add it, I think you'll be able to hear it. Okay, here comes the flam. Whoops, sorry. Wrong. Take 2. Put that back on a hard hit. The problem was I hit the step key instead of the little space right above it. You hear the flam? Great, so now I've got some variety. Again, here are my 4 patterns. We'll start with A1, A2, A3, and A4. Okay, good. So when you're thinking about writing drum parts, it's often good to think in terms of rhythm patterns and fills. A fill is like an accented drum pattern, and it's accented usually with something like a roll on the snare drum, rolls on the tom-toms, or maybe just a couple of hits of differently tuned tom-toms, or a crash cymbal might be a typical roll. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create very quickly, using copy and paste, a really basic crash cymbal fill. And I'm going to make a copy of each one of these patterns so that I can use that fill no matter what rhythm pattern is currently active. Sounds a little confusing, but watch. I think you'll understand what I'm doing. So I'm going to select pattern A1. That's this one. And I'll copy it again. Go up to the Edit menu, or if I remember the keyboard shortcut, I can just do Command C. That's what I'll do next time. So I've selected A1. I copied it. I'm going to paste it. Do you remember that key command? Command V. Paste it into A6. And then I'm going to add this crash symbol right on the first beat. So this will be the type of fill that might work right as the music changes, maybe from a verse to a chorus, or at the end of one phrase and the beginning of another. So I'm going to add it right at the beginning of beat 1. Listen to it. Now, if I let that play even just a few times in a row, it gets very busy and kind of annoying to hear that crash cymbal. So think of fills as being like spice, a little extra pepper or something. Too much tastes bad. A little bit, just right, makes the food more interesting. Same with fills. So what I'll do now is I'm going to select pattern A1 and let that run for a couple of times, and then I'll switch to A5 and then right back to A1. So you see how the fill works in a more musical context. Here we go. So imagine we're playing the first verse, just about to transition to the chorus, and here comes the chorus, and back to the verse. Got the idea? So let's do a similar fill for all 4 of these basic rhythm patterns. I'm going to select A1. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, Command C, and then the keyboard shortcut to paste it, Command V in A6. And I'll do the same thing for A3, Command C to copy, and I'll select A7, Command V to paste. Select A4, Command C to copy. Select A8, Command V to paste. And then I'll just go through all 3 of these remaining patterns and add this same crash cymbal hit. Not the most interesting fill in the world, but can be quite useful. So I've selected A6, and my drum channel 10, which has the crash cymbal loaded into it, is selected, and I'm just putting a loud or hard hit on the first beat. I'll do the same thing for pattern 7, A7, and A8. So now I've got 4 variations of a rhythm pattern and the same fill for each variation. Let's hear these in context. I'm going to go back and forth, and I'm going to just basically step through these patterns. I'll select pattern A1, and then A5, 2, and 6, and so on. Here we go. Let's select A1 to begin. Okay, see how it works? That's a quick way to set up lots and lots of patterns using copy and paste, slight variations of the rhythm patterns, and then some kind of a drum fill. Finally, before I finish this tutorial, now you would obviously want to create a lot more patterns, especially more fills. You need to have variety in fills. If you listen to real drummers, they rarely play exactly the same fill each time. And fills are, again, used to accent changes from one section of a song to the next, or the end of a phrase to a new phrase. Now finally, we've got our patterns in there, and they're loaded into patterns A1 through A8. I've just called up the Reason sequencer, and you can see the sequencer track for the redrum. Now, if I were playing drums in real time and recording them by triggering them from the keyboard, MIDI notes would show up in these fields. This is what's called a note lane. What we're going to do, instead of playing notes into this note lane, we're going to add a special type of lane to this track. It's called an automation lane, or specifically in this case, a pattern lane or a pattern select lane. So you can see my mouse moving around. I'm going to go back up to that button, follow my mouse. I'm going to go up here just to the top of the sequencer window underneath these tools, and there's a little icon there. If I let my mouse hover, it will tell me that is the Create Pattern Lane button. So as soon as I create this pattern lane, you'll see another lane appear down here. Here we go. Create pattern. And a new lane appeared. It's a little different looking from the previous one because, again, this is a lane specifically designed to accept pattern change information. That might seem weird or confusing, but keep watching. You'll see how it works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be basically writing information into this lane with a little pencil tool. There's the pencil tool right there. When I click on it, you're going to see new fields populate this area of the sequencer window. And one of them will be a pull-down menu that allows me to select a specific pattern. Okay, so just follow the mouse. Here goes the mouse over to the pencil tool. And sure enough, new information popped up over here. I could change the time signature. I'm not going to do that here. I could change blocks. We'll talk about blocks later. What I want to focus on is this field right here that says pattern loop. And the default is currently set to A1. Do you remember that I created a fill that had a cymbal crash right on the first beat? I want to get our little drum song started off with a bang, so I'm going to select, instead of selecting A1 for the beginning of the song, I'm going to select the fill for A1, which was, I loaded into A5. So I've selected, I clicked right on that little field and a drop down menu appeared, lets me choose the bank. I'm going to leave it set on bank A, and I'm going to go down to pattern loop 5. And now with my pencil, I'll click right in that first measure, and I just put pattern A5 there. Now I'll switch back to pattern A1, and I'll put that in the second, third, and fourth measure. Let's mix things up. I'm going to go to pattern A6. Remember, that's the second fill for the second rhythm pattern. And I put that in measure 5. Now I'll go to A2 and I'll draw that in. I'm running out of room, so I'll zoom in, or zoom out rather, so I can see more music. So I have pattern A6 and then A2, A2. Let's do one more of A2. And then let's continue. I'm going to get the third fill, which is A7, and the third rhythm pattern, A3. And I can click this pattern into each measure individually, or I can click and drag it across so that it fills 3 measures. And now we're ready for our final fill. And pattern A4. All right, I'll zoom out a little more so we can see the whole track. All right, now let's rewind and listen to this. And what you'll notice is the drum pattern will change automatically. I'm going to pull this sequencer down a little bit and maybe scroll up a little bit on the drum machine, and you'll see on the drum machine these patterns changing automatically when I hit play. Okay, here we go. Okay, admittedly, not the most interesting drum pattern in the world. And it kind of just fizzled at the end, didn't it? It just stopped. Let's listen to the end again. Yeah, I'm going to create one more pattern. This is going to be the simplest pattern you can ever write, but you'll see it can be very musically useful. I've already filled up patterns A1 through 8, so I'm going to click over on B for a new bank of patterns. These are all empty. I'm going to click on B1 and watch this simple but useful pattern I'm going to create. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to select the kick drum and put a hit on the first beat, and the snare drum, hit on the first beat, and that crash cymbal, a hit on the first beat. Listen to what it sounds like when I hit run. Not really interesting, but it's a great way to end a song. That's pattern B1, right? So I'll select with my pencil tool that's still highlighted, pattern B, and then I'll go down to B1 and I'll pencil that in at the end. Now let's listen to the end of my little song again. I'm going to start at measure 13 and we'll play to the end. Magic, isn't it? Okay. One last quick thing. This is the way you can get drums to drop out. What many students notice when they first start with Reason, anytime you load a redrum, it will start playing automatically anytime you start or stop the sequence, and it'll keep playing automatically until you stop the sequence. The way to get more control over when redrum plays, when it doesn't, is to again add one of these pattern lanes. If you want your drums to drop out, I'm going to select the eraser tool and I can just erase patterns and the drums will drop out at those points. Let's start in the middle here. Alright, so what you learned in this little tutorial is how to add, using copy and paste, how to add variety and variations in your rhythm patterns, and how to create fills that go along with those basic rhythm patterns. Admittedly, my fills were dull and boring, but that was just because of limited time. You can be much more creative with your fills, but remember to try to make them sound like they're related to or fit in with your basic rhythm patterns. We also learned that we can add a pattern lane to a drum machine track and then pencil in where we would like each pattern to play. That's it for this tutorial.